In this movie, what I want to take a look at is exactly how you can go about selecting content inside of Illustrator. We were exposed to that a little bit in the last movie, but I want to elaborate on that in this movie. You'll notice I'm working with a document called selections.ai, which is available inside the Chapter 1 folder. Here we have 3 different cars in 3 different boxes. What we want to do is understand exactly what happens when you make a selection with the black arrow tool, which is referred to as the selection tool, or the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow. So what we want to do is look at all of these objects, and if you mouse over these objects with the selection tool, or the direct selection tool for that matter, you get outlines of its different parts. In this case, where we're looking at the car is comprised of several different parts, and you can verify that by mousing over it. Now, when you create an illustration like this, it's not uncommon to want to move all of these elements together. So oftentimes what you do after creating all this content is you select it all and you group it. So all of these individual elements are now part of a larger group. What that gives you the ability to do with the selection tool is click on the car and have the car be treated as one element. At this point, if you click and drag, you can simply move the car to a different location. However, you will run into situations where you need to select a certain aspect of the car. One way to do that is with the direct selection tool, which is, of course, the white arrow. With the direct selection tool, if you mouse over the car, you can see its different parts and individual anchor points. Now, what's interesting about the direct selection tool is if you're not hovering over a specific anchor point and you click, you'll select that entire path, the whole object of that path. At that point, if you wanted to move it, you could click and drag, and you'll notice I removed that part of the car. I'm going to go ahead and undo that, Command-Z or Control-Z on Windows. Something else that's interesting when you're working with the selection tools is you can easily toggle between the selection tools. All you have to do is hold down the Command key. It would be the Control key on Windows. Notice right now, the direct selection tool is the active tool. If I hold down the Command key here on the Mac, it turns into the black arrow, meaning if I come over and click somewhere on the car, I'll select the entire object. So that's one way of creating a selection. Of course, in the last movie, I showed you how you could click and drag a marquee around some content to select it. You can also select individual anchor points. Again, we saw this in the last movie. All you have to do is hover over one of the anchor points and click. So now the difference is only this anchor point is selected. Opposed to clicking somewhere outside of an anchor point, you'll select the entire path, the entire object of that path. The difference is when you click on the anchor point, you're selecting just that anchor point. So in this case, if I use the arrow keys on the keyboard, I'm just going to move that one anchor point. I'll go ahead and undo that. Something else that's important to understand when you're working with objects inside of Illustrator is that there's a stacking order associated with these objects. So right now we have 6 objects within the document. Each of these objects has its own level within the stacking order. One way to look at the stacking order is to take a look at the Layers panel. The Layers panel is available over here on the right-hand side. If you don't see this little icon, you can always go to the Window menu, and under the Window menu, you can choose Layers. So here inside the Layers panel, we can see we only have one layer. But because we have multiple objects within this layer, there's a stacking order associated with this layer. And if you expand this little triangle, you'll see that we have the 3 paths, which are those squares. Then we have the 3 groups, which are the cars. You can further expand a car to see all of the individual elements that make up that car. So right now we can see that the blue square is the topmost sublayer. Then we have this red square, and then we have the yellow square. What that means is if I come over here and select the red square, notice I'm using the selection tool. If I click and drag and place this on top of the yellow square, it appears on top of the yellow square. Likewise, if I come over here and select this blue square and I click and drag, it will appear on top of both the yellow square and the red square. I'll go ahead and move the yellow square over a little bit. I'm just using the arrow keys on the keyboard to move it. I'm going to hold down the Shift key while using the arrow keys, and you move it in larger increments. So now, if we wanted to change the stacking order, we have a couple different options. One option is to come over here to the Layers panel, select the particular sublayer, and just click and drag it above the other sublayers. Now you'll notice that this object appears on top of the other boxes. Additionally, you can come up to the Object menu, and under the Object menu, you can choose Arrange, and you have several different options. In this case, if we choose Send Backwards, what it will do is send it backwards one step within the sublayers. So it will appear behind the blue sublayer, or the blue box on the document, but above the red box. And you can see that that's the case. Whereas if we come up to the Object menu and we choose Arrange and choose Send to Back, it becomes the bottommost sublayer. So now it's underneath not only the other two squares, but also all of the cars. So understanding how you can select objects obviously is very important inside of Illustrator. Additionally, you have to be aware of the stacking order when you're working with multiple objects inside the program.